Welcome back to day 3 of my 31 days of Halloween drawing tutorials right here on YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can draw this cute pumpkin from start to finish, no time lapse. So if you want to follow along and draw with me, keep watching. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and draw a pumpkin. I'm using a 3000 by 3000 300 DPI canvas. For my brush, I'm going to start out with my standard inker brush, which is part of my cartooning brush set. And for the color palette, I've already got this selected. You can actually download this color palette for free on my website. If you go to bjadell.com and go to the YouTube reference page on there, you can download and save this as a JPEG. I'll link it in the description below as well. Then once you have it saved to your camera roll, just insert a photo. It'll add it as a separate layer in here, and then you can just select the colors from the layer photos. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start here with this first orange color, and we're just going to draw a circle, holding down, and then with our other finger holding down again, and then we're going to drag and drop the color in there. I'm going to move this around and make sure it's centered, making sure snapping is selected. And then once we get those orange lines, we know it's centered. So there we go. Lock that one in. That's the first shape. We're on our way to making a pumpkin. So what I'm going to do from here, let's go up to our layers again, slide this layer to the left, and let's duplicate it. Now going down to the bottom one here, we're going to go back up to our color picker, and we're going to go to the next orange. Then we're going to just drag and drop. You're going to see, can't tell the difference because it's underneath this layer. So we need to move this one. So with that bottom layer selected, if we go to our arrow here, and I'm on freeform right now, so we can start to slide this over. We just kind of want it to peek through here on the side. And then I'm going to go to warp and then just kind of pull this in from the top and then also from the bottom, so it kind of flattens out there a little bit. And there we go. We've got the one extra color added. So we're going to slide this one to the left. We're going to duplicate that. Then we're going to go back up to our arrow again. We're going to go to flip horizontal and then freeform and slide this one over to the right. Make sure it's about the same distance as the other one. And locking that one in. So now we've got this left and right side. So let's go ahead and pinch these together. And then we're going to duplicate this one by sliding it to the left and hitting duplicate. Now we want to go back down to that layer 1 at the bottom. We're going to select our last orange on here and drag and drop that. Then go back up to our arrow, and we're going to freeform and just slide these out left and the right. Lock it in and see how it looks. I think I want to kind of warp these a little bit to make them come down at the bottom and kind of flatten off. Same thing here at the top. And there we go. So we've got the base shape of our pumpkin done. Let me zoom in here just a tad. So let's go ahead and pull up our color palette again. And the next one here to the right is the brown. That's what we're going to use for the eyes and for the mouth. So let's go ahead and start that next. So let's go to our layers here. We're going to go to our top layer, and we're going to make a new layer by hitting the plus button. And then using our finger, let's just do a triangle here, making sure that the lines connect. Just like we did with the circle, hold down one finger, then the other. That one's making a square. That's not what we want. Triangles are a little bit harder, it seems like. You'll see there we locked in a perfect triangle. So now we can just kind of move it around to where we want it. I'm going to go back to freeform here and then just kind of get this guy positioned where I want it. I think that looks pretty good. So now we're going to go back up to our layers. We're going to slide this layer to the left and we're going to duplicate. Now we're going to go back up to our arrow. You can see a lot of this is just repeating the same idea and same process. And then we're going to flip horizontally. And we're going to drag this one off to the right. And you'll see those snapping lines come up, so we know that those are on the same plane. We'll go ahead and lock it in, and there we go. So we've got our two eyes. Now, of course, this guy needs a mouth. But first, let's go ahead and merge these together by pinching them, or you can tap it and hit merge down to. And let's go ahead and do the mouth now. So once again, a new layer. And let's just do a pretty big oval here. And don't worry, I know this looks ridiculous, but we're going to fix it here in a second. So now that we've got this big solid oval, let's go up to our arrow again and start moving this around. I'm just going to kind of drag it in here so it's inside that first orange. And then once I've got that done, I'm going to hit warp. Then I'm going to start pulling and playing around with the shape of this. So dragging down from the top here, pulling up from the sides, pulling down. Just want to get that big jack-o'-lantern smile in here. And at the same time, making sure it's as centered as what I can get it. I think that looks pretty good, so we'll lock that in. Now, he's got, of course, this huge smile, but we need some teeth in there. So the easy way to do this is we're going to switch over to our eraser now. And I'm going to move over to Standard Inker Streamline. And you're going to see we're on this mouth here. And what we're going to do, I'll zoom in just a little bit better so you can see it here. We're just going to erase. And if we erase where that mouth was, where we were there, you'll see it's basically going to bring that orange back, and that's going to help us form these teeth. So we just follow around here and erase. Same one here. Kind of locking that in. If you hold down, it's going to give you a locked in version of that. There's that. And then we'll go one more over here. And of course, these can be not perfect, kind of jaggy, or one bigger than the other, just because if you've ever carved a pumpkin before, you know that it doesn't always turn out perfect and symmetrical. You can make them however you want. You don't have to even do this expression. You could play around and do something totally different. If you wanted to maybe make some like this that are bigger on the top and then kind of angle down, you can do that. Put some more down in here. I've got these coming in at different angles. Another one here. And we'll do one more here. I got big ones, I've got small ones. And then if you don't like them necessarily, you can go in and go back in with your brush, pencil, whatever you're using. And then you can kind of square off these lines a little bit better. Totally up to you how you want them to look. All right, so there we go. We've got the mouth in there. Now let's go ahead and give him some eyes. So to do that, let's go back and go to our layer 4, and we're gonna make a new layer again. And then going back to our colors here, we're gonna go with this yellow color. And then we're gonna make sure that on here we hit clipping mask so it stays inside of our triangles that we've got. I'm going to hold down, and once again, so we've got one eye. And this for that cartoony look, I think I'm going to make the right one just a little bit smaller. And then selecting our color of the eye, we're going to use that for the pupil. So we can go in here and do a circle with the pupil. Drag and drop. Not going to work because we don't have it connected there. It's going to pick a little bit too much, so just go in and color it in by hand. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. And once we get these filled in, I'm going to go back up here and pick, let's just go ahead and do white. If we go out here and select outside of the canvas, or outside of what we're drawing on, I guess, we can just select the white. I don't have that in the color palette because a lot of times with white it's so easy to select. I won't always include that. And so there we go. We've got the pupils and kind of that reflection in there. Let's go ahead and give them a stem next. So to do that, let's go to the very bottom here and make a new layer. We're going to drag this down to the very back. And then this brown here next to the yellow, we're going to go ahead and select that one. And here are a couple of options. If you just want to draw it in, you can. I know some people have a little bit more problems actually drawing by hand. So since we're using shapes in this one, let's do that again here. So once again, just an oval, dragging and dropping to fill that in. And then we can go back up to our arrow and on that warp tool, just kind of play around with this. And you can see, you can get that same thing that I just drew pretty easy just by doing the warp on here. And then of course that's going to make sure that your lines are super smooth going around, and it gives you that same kind of effect. So I would recommend, if you have problems drawing shapes like that, maybe just use the warp tool, do a basic square or a basic circle to start out with, and then play around with it. Makes it super easy. So that's our basic design. Now we need to go in and start adding some shadows and highlights to this. So starting here, we need to decide where the light source is coming from. And I think you kind of want to have it coming here from the top left, but more towards the center. So it's going to kind of give off shadows all the way around, because we still need to kind of separate these colors. They're close to each other as far as the values go. They're not exact, so they still look like two different shapes or two different colors next to each other, but we need to bring that home a little bit more. So we actually need shadows on both sides. So having it kind of come in from the top here, I think is going to be the wise bet. So let's go ahead and selecting layer 1, hit the plus button for a new layer. We're going to set this one as clipping mask, and then going back up to our color palette, this second row, the first one here on the left, that's going to be the shadow color starting out. And then I'm going to switch my brush here. For this, I'm going to use my texture pack, which I will link down in the description below if you guys want to check that out. I think I'm going to use sand for this one. If you don't have the texture pack and don't want to get it, you can just search through the other stuff in Procreate, the preloaded brushes, and see if something similar works for you. But we're going to start out with that. So once again, new layer here on a clipping mask. And I just need to play around with size to see where I'm at. I think that's pretty good. So I'm just going to start to go down and around here. It's going to start to kind of build up that shadow. Now that I've got that one there, I'm going to go ahead and go to my next big orange blob and make a new layer here. Once again, we're going to set this one to clipping mask, and that's going to allow us to start doing the shadows here on this other one. These I'm going to go a little bit heavier, because if I go with the exact same color there as the other shadow, they're going to really kind of start to blend together. So there's that. And then let's go ahead and go down to the bottom one. Once again, making a new layer, setting this as clipping mask, and building up the shadows down on this one. And you'll see this is why we did these as those separate layers. So it really has that three-dimensional look to it, and it makes these pop quite a bit more. They actually look like they have some weight to them, and it makes them stand out better. Okay, so we've got that all shadowed in. Let's go ahead next and go to our brown color here. This is how we're going to kind of build up the inside of the eyes and the mouth. So to do this, let's go ahead and add a new layer on top of the eyes here. And then I'm just going to pull in, oops, need to switch back to my standard inker here. Just going to pull in a line here at the bottom of the eyes. So we got one there, pull in one here, And then I'm going to go and do a new layer. Once I have my mouth selected here, and we're going to set this one to clipping mask. And then I'm going to do kind of the same technique down here at the bottom. So starting here, I'm going to kind of curve this out and around. Try that one more time. Actually, let me switch to the streamline. For bigger sections like this, I think streamline works a lot better. We're just going to curve that around like so. And then I'm going to zoom in here so you can see this better. I'm going to pull these down at an angle and come down. So you can see we're starting to build up that three-dimensional quality here on the teeth. Then we're going to do the same thing here on the back side of these. So basically just a line going diagonally off the end here and then going up. So up, over and up. Or if you want to go down and over, you can do that too. You can see it really starts to build up that three-dimensional feel to it. That's what we're going for. Okay, so now that we've got those, we can kind of make these pop a little bit more with their own shadows. So if we go back up to our color picker here, and I'm going to go to this dark brown on the top here. This is what we're going to use for this next step. So on the layer here with the mouth shadows, we're going to alpha lock this. And then we're going to go back to whatever you used for that texture for the shadows, which I used the sand. I'm going to shrink this brush down quite a bit. Then I'm going to start to build up some shadows here. So these teeth look like they're cutting in a little bit. Don't want to do it too dark or too thick. And then you can kind of pull that out too as you go. Then if you want to go bigger with the brush to get more of a believable shadow as it fades, do that as well. All right, so there we go. We'll do the same shadows here on the eyes. So going back to on mine, layer 11, we can just kind of pull in some shadows here from the sides. Kind of build up a little bit more realism there. So that looks good. Now let's go ahead and add some shadows here to the stem coming out of the top. So once again, adding a new layer on top, hitting clipping mask. You can also do this with alpha lock. The reason I like to use clipping mask is because if I have it done and I think, that shadow's maybe a little bit too dark, you can go back in, hitting the end here and adjust the opacity. So that way having it on a separate layer using clipping mask is a little bit more forgiving later on if you decide to make changes rather than going with alpha lock, because it's all going to be on one layer that way. And you're not going to have as much control after the fact. So that's something to kind of keep in mind and consider. So, all right, now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and go back up to our layer 8. This is our first shadow layer here. We're also going to do the highlights on this layer. If you wanted to do highlights on a separate layer, do a clipping mask, you could. This way it's going to free up some layers, so we're just going to keep it as is. So let's go ahead and select this color here, this kind of off-white cream color. And we need to make sure we're on sand, which we are. We're going to just start to go around and brighten up some of these areas. Go ahead and do a little bit of highlights here underneath the eyes too. Make that look a little bit more three-dimensional. And with this, the highlight is really going to depend, and the look and feel is going to depend on how hard you are pressing with the brush. So certain areas you can press harder, certain areas you can press lighter, and it's really going to affect the overall look and feel. That's a little bit too dark. These I'm going in heavier here towards the top, so that once again builds up that three-dimensional feel to them. Make the brush bigger and start pulling out that highlight just a little bit more. So basically the bigger brush is going to give you just more of a spread out effect. If you need to get in there really tight, that's when you go in and go to the thinner brush. It's more like drawing with a line. All right, I think that's good. So now we can move on to the next layer down. We'll start to add in just a little bit of highlights here on this one. You'll see I'm kind of hitting that back section a little bit more. The top, and then the back as it comes down. That's a little bit too light. There we go. Don't want too much back there because that's where the heavier shadows are. Now the final final shadow section here for the final highlights here in the back. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to switch back to my original shadow color and going back to my first one on this main pumpkin here, the main round part of the pumpkin. We're going to go in and do a little bit of shadow down here below that highlight. So that's going to make that a little bit more three-dimensional. That same thing here around the bottom. Just going to build up those. And then just hitting a little bit here around the corners. That's going to make that look, once again, just a little bit more cut in. All right, there we go. So next up, let's go ahead and add some shadows and highlights to the eyes. So for this one, I'm going to use this second row and that kind of dark color there. And let's go ahead and go to the eyes. I'm going to make a new layer, clipping mask. Actually, this one's going to clip to everything there. So let's go ahead and let's not do that. Let's go ahead and just set this one as alpha lock and just do it directly on here. So I'm just going to kind of build up a shadow here around the bottom. I want to make sure it kind of stays down here in the yellow though and doesn't go up to that brown. There we go. And then going back to this off-white color, I'm going to build up a little bit of highlight here and around, and it's going to make this look, once again, a little bit more three-dimensional. Make the eye pop out a little bit more once we zoom back out. And it's really just going back and forth trying to get that right size. So you've got enough control over it. Doesn't go too big, doesn't go too small either. Once we zoom back out, you can see that really builds that up quite a bit. Looks really, really cool. And then last but not least on this part, let's go ahead, go back down to our layer 13 here to add in some highlights to the stem there. Pull this in and around the top left, kind of fade it out as I go, pressing harder at first, then letting up, and then going back in and maybe doing a little bit more of a solid one there. And just looking at this, I think I want to add one more section of highlights to the face here. So if I pull these down, that's going to make that pop just a little bit more. All right, there we go. And that looks good. Looks a little plain though. So let's give them some more stuff going on. Let's do a background here. So let's go to the bottom layer, hit plus for a new layer, bring it all the way down to the bottom. And then going to our colors here, let's select this bottom row here, third row, and then this first color here after the colors split. Going back up to our brushes, let's go ahead and let's use feathered crosshatch for this. And this is going to give us almost like this hay look underneath them. So once again, just pressing real light. It's going to give this really nice crosshatch. And then let's go ahead and make a new layer again. We're going to set this one to clipping mask. And we're going to go to this next brown color here and just kind of add in a shadow here underneath. That looks pretty good there. And then finally, looks a little weird with some white around there now that we've got that background in there. So let's go down here to the bottom layer again, make a new layer. And hopefully following along, and the fact that I made this a little bit smaller canvas, 3000 by 3000 pixels, hopefully you guys haven't run out of layers with non-pro versions. If you do, you can always kind of pinch these together and merge layers as we go if you start to run out. But I think you'll be okay. So now we've got this bottom layer done. Let's switch back our brush here and let's use paper. And then we've got this darker off-white color here. We're just gonna kind of do a paper texture behind everything here. Don't want it to get too close to the bottom though, because that's going to be close to the same color. So we'll pull that almost kind of darker here in the center and fade it out so we still got some of that white. And then I'm going to go back in with this blue. Just kind of brighten everything up there. Be careful not to get too dark because we still want that other color coming through from what we just laid down. All right, so there we go. I think we're pretty much done. Let me go ahead and switch back to a darker color here because, of course, I got to sign this at the very end. So let me switch back to my cartooning, my standard inker, and I'll get this thing signed. So there we go, day 3 of my 31 days of Halloween drawing tutorials. Hopefully you guys liked today's video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos because there's still a whole lot more of these coming. And I definitely want to see what you guys do if you follow along to these tutorials. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter at BJDell. Make sure you tag me on there if you post these to social media, or you can post them on Facebook. If you join my art group over there called Keep Creating, a group for artists by artists, I will link that in the description below. You can post in there as well. You can find me online, of course, bjdell.com, as well as on my new podcast, Make Money with Your Art. You can stream that wherever you listen to podcasts at. And that's it for today's tutorial. Hopefully you'll join me for tomorrow. And until next time, keep creating.